Welcome to Kettlebell Corner, where strength meets theory, where we take you on a deeper dive into all things kettlebells. And in this episode, we're going to talk about ladders. They may look simple: start low, climb high, hit your reps, hit all your goals, but are they really the best way to train with kettlebells? Well, we're going to cover where the ladders shine, where they fall short, and the ugly things to avoid when it comes to training with ladders. All right, Roger.
Yeah.
I'm Jeremiah Whalen. In case you don't know, that's Roger Parks. What's up, man? Princess Leia
No,
gold bikini. You gonna show us
yeah.
that bikini bottom?
No, not right now.
Okay. Perhaps later then.
I don't feel properly groomed.
Oh, all right. I'm just gonna move on from that.
Okay.
First, let me explain what a ladder is for everybody listening. If you don't know, it's essentially taking your reps and raising them one. We'll say one for the sake of this conversation per attempt. I don't want to say set. I guess I don't know if that's right. We'll kind of get into it. But for example, I'm going to press 1 and 1 on the right, 2 and 2 on 3 and 3, and so on and so on. You go up. And we're going to stick this one to, let's just say, the press for now, for the context of this talking, Roger. And we'll explain as this goes along where else ladders could be used and where you shouldn't lose them. Sound good?
Sure.
Okay, good. You feeling good? Feeling great? Let's talk with the good, Roger. All right, some benefits. Okay. Sometimes we like to lay out a little more context, but I think we'll just go with here. Let's start with the benefits for a beginner. All right, so if you're a beginner, check this out. And if you're not a beginner, stick around. All right, first, technique. Now, how can these ladders help develop technique? And are they one of the best ways to use it, or is there something better? Tell me.
Oh, if you're a beginner, I think it's a fantastic way to begin. You're not going with super high volume, which is good. In one way. Now there's another way of thinking about being a beginner and learning is that you want more reps. More reps give you an opportunity to succeed or fail, and that's how learning happens. However, one of the unique characteristics of a ladder is it gives you this ability to reset in between rungs, which is really cool. So you do your 1+1, one press each side, put the bell down. Gives you a chance to reflect, gives you a chance to think, how did that go? What can I change? Is there a movement cue or a directive that I want to keep in mind? So I do think that this is a very effective beginner technique. Not the only, but certainly when it comes to kettlebells. I mean, if you're using kettlebells, the odds are you have some baseline fitness anyway. So let's assume that you do. The ladder method gives you an opportunity to reset in between reps, and for each successive rung, it gives you a little bit more exposure, but you're never going to get a crazy amount of exposure because generally ladders will cap at 5. That doesn't mean you can't go above. This is the ladder is a mechanism, so it's not a thing that you have to do a particular way. But generally speaking, ladders cap at about 5, and for the sake of this conversation, we'll think about that. So it gives for each chunk of work, it gives beginners an opportunity to do successively more while checking in each time, maybe, watching some film or getting feedback from someone else. And it's a very effective technique to learn without having too many opportunities to get it wrong. So if
Gotcha.
something gets away from you, you're not doing 7 bad reps. Maybe you're only doing 1 or 2.
That makes sense. You talked about in that you said there's a built-in rest. Now, the rest is going to be, I suppose it's going to be subjective, but is there any kind of general guidelines? Are you just waiting until you're like, okay, it's been 5 seconds, I'm going to go again, or it's been 2 minutes, maybe that's too long? I know what I've come across a lot with training new people in particular, when you set them out on their own, and sometimes this would happen in a kettlebell club class we used to lead. If you're letting people pace their own ladders, they do the 1 rep, and then almost 10 seconds later, like, all right, I'm going into rep 2. How do we set up the rest for somebody that's new or in general for ladders?
It's usually as needed. I like to give people, if someone is a beginner, I like to give them some parameters. If I'm working with someone, obviously we have a little bit of dialogue between rungs, and I usually just tell them in the beginning, like, don't be in such a hurry to check the box. And as we get through this episode, as this evolves, you're going to get, people will get a greater understanding that ladders are not just a thing that you do. It's at least not to use them effectively, that after your first rep is a check-in. So, maybe, oh, that felt really good. Why? What felt really good about it? You don't want to be so overly analytical that you get out of your body, that you get out of the movement, but you should take a chance to reflect. It's not a race. Figure out what went well, what didn't go well, then go into your second rep. If rest is important, then designate it. And that's what I often do if it is important. But generally it's a rest as needed. This is all skill acquisition though, and learning how to auto-regulate your workouts is an important thing. Learning how to do that is a skill in and of itself. So people will get better at it. And you just need to understand that it is a thing. It is a thing that you need to get better at. It is a skill you need to build. How long do I need? This is, common with other types of kettlebell work in general, but you have to feel into the process. It's not, you're not always going to be on the time, or on a clock rather.
Yeah, that makes sense. And when it comes to the number of reps per rung of ladder, so the reps are in that sort of thing. If you're a beginner and you're only pressing up to 3, do you need to climb to that fourth rung? If you can't quite get a fourth rep, if you know you're not going to get a fourth rep, do you push it, or do you just say, hey, I'm going to layer on these 3 reps, these 3 rung ladders, and just kind of work that until I feel good enough to get the fourth? Or are you always trying to push to that like failure state with a ladder, or never at a failure state?
Well, in pushing to failure with exercise, it has limited benefit in very, very narrow applications. So, pushing to failure can be an effective technique if you're a bodybuilder. And some bodybuilders use this technique more than others, where you go to the point where your muscles just can't go anymore. But then you're building a lot of neurological fatigue. You require a lot more recovery, and it's going to take longer for you to build the strength or build the muscle that you need. So, pushing to failure is generally something you don't do with kettlebell training unless you absolutely need to. Sometimes it has some limited application if you're building up endurance, let's say for the snatch test. Some people will have you do, however many reps you can do in this period of time, really push yourself. But beyond that, a ladder is not that, especially if you're a beginner. Your goal is to get good, crisp, clean movement that is successful. And it is almost always better to end succeeding than failing. Not that failure is necessarily bad, but you want to feed your brain success rather than failure. And people will, if they're failing a lot, it means that they're not really choosing wisely. And there are some people, and I don't disagree with this philosophy. I don't always use it, but I don't disagree with it. Some people will not fail. They do not set themselves up to fail a rep. They just won't let it happen. They'd rather underwork a little bit and make sure that they have those good successful reps and push right up to that edge, but never cross over. So no, you should not be pushing to failure every time. It really doesn't make sense, and it's in general a bad training philosophy, at least as it relates to kettlebells.
Yeah, and I like that. And to your point, I'll use myself for example. Today, as a matter of fact, I was working double kettlebell press with the 32, but I was working a ladder and I was cleaning before each press. And I don't know if that's always the case or if that's something the beginner should do. I was using it for a particular reason. And when I got to the 5 rung the first time through, as I went back down the ladder, 1, 2, 3, I knew on my third clean that I was really laboring to get it up there. And yeah, I probably would have got the presses up, but I felt it good to kind of stop at that third rung at that point and kind of quit while I was ahead and say, hey, that was good. That was good. And I did finish off with some double push presses just to kind of just add a little bit more higher volume. But aside from that, that doesn't count for today. But I think that's a good example of, even if you're advanced, taking a moment to just stay on the right side of that. And yeah, teaching my brain that it's success, because I failed many presses, Roger. I don't know if you know this or not. All right,
Well,
let's go ahead.
hold on. I don't want to gloss over this point because I think it's important. Is that you didn't avoid the work, right? You just
Mm.
switched it up rather than leaving those ladders where they were, you filled in with a push press, which is mechanically a similar movement. It's not identical, but it's going to give you some carryover. It's going to give you some benefit if you are working your press. Teaches you some lessons that you might need. So you're modifying the work rather than just skipping it entirely. And sometimes skipping is the thing to do, but if you don't need that, then do something that might be mechanically similar. And in this case, a push press, even a push press, maybe with a slow negative. So delaying the way down on the press. That's a solid way to continue to get your work done, build progress without getting a bunch of bad reps in.
Yeah, and I use that with a lot of newer trainees that I have to. Everybody wants to be able to press as much as possible all the time, and it's just not a reality when you're starting out, especially. So we incorporate that push press too. So I take a dose of my own medicine right there, Roger. All right, you're a little more advanced, and this could apply to the beginners a little bit, but let's talk about training heavier without burning out. First, Roger, can you help people decide what the right bell is for heavy? If maybe some parameters around that, and how could they handle this sort of training and still get that strength without that burnout?
One easy way to do that is to think about what fits within the container. So in this case, you have a container. A ladder is a container. That's where you're putting your reps. Right off the top, you're thinking to yourself, what bell could I move 5 times at my top set? If you are doing ladder training, if you're working your way up to a 5th with the intention of using the same bell, you're going to be making some guesses. Let's use you as the example. Okay. Your max overhead press right now is a 44 kilo, as far as we know. Correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Last
would
test.
you set up to do a 1 to 5 rep ladder with a 44 kilo bell?
No, because I can only press it once, maybe twice if I'm feeling saucy, and only on one arm. So that's obviously a bad call. So
okay, so we're going to be getting, you don't want to train. 44 represents your max, your 100%. And when it comes to strength training, different numbers people agree on, but a lot of people will say if you get up in this 70-75% of your max range, you are working strength. So you can do a little bit of math if that's what you want to do, and say, let's say, what is 75% of your 44 kilo? And for those who are not watching, he's doing math right now. That's why I'm being quiet.
All right, it's 33 kilograms, Roger, which is obviously not a bell that I have. So 32 is probably a good training weight for that.
So you can get some work done with a 32, right? You also can go back and forth between the 36. Now, my guess is you're close with a 40, but I don't think you've got 5 reps in you with a 40 after you've done 4 rungs with the ladder. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
Okay. So we're already setting up our ladder based on possibilities. We're already looking at our top bell. Now, you can make an argument that this is actually a limitation of ladders, and I would listen to that argument. But right now, our focus is to try to cram in some volume while we have a bell that we can actually move. So what I would set up is on certain days, I would do a ladder maybe with a 32, and some days I'm going to do a ladder with a 36. You're still getting within that threshold where you're building strength. Maybe on your 32 days, you'll do an extra ladder. You'll get more volume in. So for what you're sacrificing in mechanical tension, just meaning you're going to be lifting less mass, you're going to increase the volume. Because if you do that same volume with the 36, you may have so much neurological fatigue that it's going to take you longer to recover. And you may even miss a press workout, or your next press workout may have to be subpar. Whereas if you do, it may be that 2 B- efforts is going to be better than 1 A+ effort and 1 C- effort, right? So we want to think about that. So we're gonna structure our ladder with what it is that we can do, and you'll learn this pretty quickly based on the top end. But you're not looking to do a ladder with the heaviest bell possible. If you do that, then you're not really training, you're demonstrating. Your max is to demonstrate how strong you are. Training is for working with bells that are less than you can currently do. So if you are Jeremiah, back in this same context,
Okay.
if you can only do 5 reps with a 36 and you're gritting your teeth and you're sweating and you're really, really having a hard time, then that represents your 100% effort, and you should not be doing that often. You want to have a rep or two in reserve. So theoretically, I'd like to see you be able to do maybe 6 or 7 reps with a 36. That we have a little bit left in the tank. Does that answer that?
Yeah, and you could sort of then you could build up. I like that idea of instead of trying to be heavy and not have that reserve in the tank, using that, let's say 32 in this case, and instead of doing 2 ladders, maybe I'm doing 3 ladders in that workout, or even a fourth or something like that. And we'll talk a bit about volume here in a minute, but
Or
I,
variable
that does.
weight?
Yeah. Okay. So tell me about a variable weight. So when we're saying that, are we talking about just different bells periodically throughout, or how would you structure
Sure.
that?
I mean, if I'm coaching you
Okay.
specifically for a press, I would probably, depending upon the difficulty, but I would probably make your rung, definitely your rung one, maybe your rung one and two. I would give you a 40 for those.
Hmm.
And then for your the rest of your rungs, I would see if you could do a 36. Maybe you could do a 40 for rungs 1 and 2. You do a 36 for rungs 3 and 4, and for rung 5 you do a 32. So that would be one way you do it. You mix the weight. Now your overall volume would be the same, but the intensity at each volume would accumulate and be a little bit higher. So there one thing that I think everyone should come away from this with is that a ladder is a container you put your reps in. It is a way to apply volume, but really what we're after is stimulus. So is the stimulus sufficient to generate strength? Is it sufficient to trigger hypertrophy? And that's going to depend on the intensity, so how heavy a bell is and how many reps you're doing.
Yeah, and it adds up. So if you did 2 ladders, you've essentially done 30 reps per arm. So
Sure.
that's going to get into some some of the potential limitations, or some of the bad, if you will, Roger, with ladder training. And one of them is some of that hidden volume, because they do add up fast. And what could happen is you might be caught off guard with some fatigue or something like that, and then you're breaking down. So we kind of talked a little bit about why you wouldn't want to get in those grit your teeth 100% max effort, but some of the pitfalls that come from that higher hidden volume could include, aside from that breaking down form, what are some other things that could come from that, Roger?
I don't want to gloss over this point. I want to spell this out, and it's something that you just hinted at, but I want to make this explicit. So those rep max charts you'll see in books, like this is your
Mhm.
1 rep max, this is your 3 rep, 5 rep, 10 rep, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Even if you're doing a 10 rep max, it's still a max. If you were taking the maximum amount of weight that you can lift 10 times, I mean, a true max lift, it is very effortful and it is very hard. You should not be doing that every workout. Now, that's different than going to failure, because when people go to failure, mechanical failure, their bodies can't move. Um, they're not usually doing it with a very heavy weight. They're letting time and they're letting all the fatigue accumulate. But what we're talking about specifically neurological fatigue, and secondary to that is physiological fatigue. But neurological fatigue, if you haven't experienced it, it's a very specific, like, you just feel fried. So if every effort, if let's say you're doing a mixed weight bell, and for every rung you were doing, let's say you were to start with your 44 for
Hmm.
rung 1, and then go to a 40, right? For rung 2, and then, it's so on, so on, so on. And every rung is a 100% of whatever that rep is. You're still maxing out on every rep, and that will accumulate, that will add up. So it's an important thing that you need to understand. A lot of people just look at this idea of maxing out as what is the most weight you can lift, but what is the most weight you can lift for a particular amount of reps? that can add up, and that can make you really, really tired. So you don't always hit that. And a lot of people, kettlebells will talk about, leave a couple in the tank. Sometimes you hear people talk about reps in reserve, right? You should feel like you're stopping every set with maybe another 1 to 3 reps that you could possibly do. The reps in reserve is going to vary. Again, sometimes you want to go to failure, sometimes you want to push. I'm not saying never do that, but that should not be all of your training, or you're going to get too much fatigue. So that being said, a lot of the hidden volume is incidental, meaning you're doing too much work with a bell that you're having a hard time managing. And that's one of the important things you can do. When you're doing your early ladders, your early rungs, it doesn't feel very hard. Maybe you think, oh, I'm gonna do 5 ladders. That's a lot of reps.
That's a lot of
And
reps.
it is.
What is that?
So
120. I mean, said 180 reps.
so each ladder, 1 to 5 ladder is going to have 15 reps per side. If you're doing 1+1, so with a press, right? So you're doing 2, you've got 30. 30 reps is 3 times 10, and that's a full working set for a lot of people. So when you're doing 3 reps or 3 ladders and more, that volume can get really, really high, and it's easy to look over because you're only doing 5 reps. You're not doing your 8s, 10s, 12s. So it's really easy to just do a bunch of these things and forget that this all adds up.
Would you, with that as a factor, with the ladders, are you pairing these press ladders with additional things in the rest, or maybe not necessarily the rest, but in the session? Or is it feasible to say my press ladder workout is going to be a solid enough workout for what I'm going for? Or is it strictly case by case on how you feel, sort of thing? How would you set somebody up if they're working out at home and they're like, okay, Coach Rogers said do some ladders because I want to look cool like him. And what else am I going to do?
Again, it is going to be case by case. If you are working a higher intensity, higher effort press workout, you're going to want to rest in between. You need to recover. If you're let's say you're in the early stages of a press workout, you want to start building things like some muscle mass. You want to build a little muscular endurance. You want to build yourself up, and these lifts are not going to be at the upper percentages. So I have no problem with you throwing in some squats. Another pattern that can get you, another pattern that can contribute to your press, because the ability to create mechanical tension, the ability to stay tight, is going to be something you're going to have with a rack squat in particular. So a bell on one side, you're going to have to learn to fight that lateral flexion, that rotation, all of those things. So I think that would be a good complement. Low rep ballistics, 1-arm swings can be really effective, especially because you need to learn how to control that one side. And something interesting happens when you do a ballistic, especially on the slightly heavier side, right? You are asking your brain to fire really, really hard and fast. You're really asking your muscles to go hard, and that will often have a carryover effect. So as a something to experiment with a lift, sometimes doing a couple, let's say, heavy-ish swings, not so heavy where you barely move the bell, but something where you move something substantial, but you move it very quickly, immediately go into a heavy press or a heavy squat, and very often you'll find that bell moves easier. So it is going to be case by case. But what I would say is, if you are pressing and it's a heavy press session, you're toward the end of the program, you're working your heavier bells, rest, hang out, do what you need to do. If it's earlier on, get the rest of your work in, because you want to accumulate volume. You want volume to train you at the beginning of a program. So get as much of it in as you can. You're using lighter bells, do your squats, do your presses, do them together, throw in some planks or some carries, whatever. As long as the work doesn't directly compete with your ability to press too often. Maybe you want that, but generally you don't.
Yeah, and that might be something. If it's too heavy for you to press, hold caution on those rack squats, because you are in your shoulders helping out in that too. So something to think about. One thing I want to say that's sort of in the bad category for this particular thing is, and Roger, I want you to kind of talk on this a little bit as well, is that they're not ideal in this sort of scenario for ballistics. Now, I mentioned at the beginning we're going to couch it in the context of press, and the reason I'm saying that is because when it comes to ballistics, you're doing a one-and-one swing or a one-and-one snatch, maybe the snatch if it's like a heavier snatch or whatever, but then you're two-and-two swings. It's not going to probably train you the right way that you'd want to get out of those ballistics. Am I correct in thinking that, Roger? Or why is that considered a bad for this sort of training? Can you use ladders for ballistics? Let's hear it.
Sure, you can. I don't think it's necessarily bad. I just don't see a huge advantage to it. As you are moving into skill work, let's say you're snatching for the first time. I love a 1 to 5 ladder. I think that's
Mm.
great because you're hyper focused on each individual rung. You're analyzing, you're seeing what went well, what didn't go well, and you're doing very low volume, so there are fewer opportunities to hurt yourself. So in this case, I think a 1 to 5 ladder could really shine. But once you get up to the point where you're doing your ballistics, um, I don't think ladders are generally going to train the physiological things that you want to train um, very well. Because generally you're going to do lower rep swings and you're going to do them with very high intent, meaning you're going to work really hard and you're going to do them for a short period of time because that's going to build your capacity, or you're going to do them against the clock, which is going to build your muscular endurance or your cardiovascular endurance, rather strength endurance. So it's not that you can't do them. If you did a swing ladder, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, right? That's a lot. But
Yeah.
I mean, count that, add that up. How many swings is that? If
But
that's
is
the
it
case, though, the main thing that I think you're going to be training is your forearms.
right? Oh, and like just simply holding on for that long, pretty much.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, and maybe it's
I
good for
like
your
I like
snatch test.
time as a variable. Either you're going to do low rep and you're going to go really hard and you're going to work what a lot of people call power, or you're going to work on a clock and you're going to do a manageable amount of reps and you're going to work to rest ratios. So you're more directly engaging with the things that you're trying to change. So again, it's not that it's not bad. It's just I don't think it's ideal, which is why I don't do it very often.
All right, that makes sense. That makes sense. You mentioned in our prep, stagnation risk is something that might fall into a limitation or the bad, if you will, for this. What does that mean? What do you say stagnation risk? Does it mean like you're not going to progress with the ladder, or you have to be more hyper aware of how you're progressing with the ladder?
It could mean that when you're only doing 1 to 5 reps, and this is common. I've fallen into this pattern. If you're only doing 1 to 5, then your muscles don't have the capacity to do more. And when you're looking at, any goal for the most part is going to benefit from hypertrophy, more muscular strength, making your muscles bigger. And 5 reps is not the best number to do that in most cases. So if I never get above 5, if I never go into 10, then I'm probably missing out on some muscle growth. And there's something to be said with just novelty, that this is different. My body and my brain have to figure it out. So I'm going to get results because of that. So yeah, I do think that it can just get boring if all you're
Mhm.
doing is, oh, I'm going to start with my 16 kilo bell. All right, I want to do 3 1 to 5 ladders, and then I'm going to move up to a 20 kilo. And once you get up higher, if you ultimately like want to get 40 plus, maybe you start doing variable weight. But for the most part, the structure is going to be the same. You're not going to expose yourself to novel stimulus, and you're probably going to be missing out on some adaptations. So for me at the beginning of, if I'm doing a strength block, so right now we're both training to recertify our strong first level 2. So we need to do a half body weight press. At the very beginning of this strength, or this program that I started, I was doing higher reps, lower relative intensity. So what I mean by that is lower percentage of my maximum bell, but I was doing sets of 10. And by the time I got done with my sets of 10, I had my press. It was some novelty. It was the fact that I rarely went above 10. My shoulders got bigger, my triceps got bigger, my chest got a little bigger, and it was just all in all an easier feat. But then now I'm going and I'm refining and I'm working on the next belt up because I want to press that with more regularity, and then I want to get doubles of that. So, I'm still using the program, but I made progress by the novel stimulus. So you can stagnate doing that. So there's nothing wrong with surprising your body and saying, hey, even if you're doing, I'm going to do 5x5.
Yeah.
You're getting more volume at a with a heavier bell. That's going to be more of a true strength workout, and it'll be more taxing, but you also might get some benefit from shaking things up a little bit.
Well, yeah, and you might. Well, that's kind of interesting because if you do the 5x5, you're 25 reps per side. Where if you do the 2 ladders, you're 30 reps per side. But the difference being, you're now every time it's that top rung. Every set is 5 reps. So that's where
Exactly
the
right.
volume. That's where that volume plays in, and where you're going to have to be engaged longer for that.
And you might find that you can do a rep ladder with 30 reps, right? You might be able to do 2 ladders per side, or however you want to think about it, with a bigger bell than you can with a 5x5, because you only need to do 1 top set with 5 reps. And that is one of the virtues of ladder training, is that you can get the same volume or more volume with a heavier bell. If you're doing 30 reps, think about the bell size that you'd have to use. If you're doing 2 ladders, 30 reps per side, that's 3 sets of 10.
Yeah.
What size bell can you press for 10 reps? You can do a 28 for 10 reps. I've seen you do it.
Roger, I can do a 32 for 10 reps now, but that's because
Okay.
I did that novel stimulus at the beginning, made my muscles bigger.
So you can do that now. And my guess is that's going to be a lot more taxing for you, though, than doing the, that's going to be closer to a max than doing an equivalent amount of reps with the same bell. So,
yeah,
you can kind of pick it, but that also probably got you closer to doing your ladders with the 36 and the 40. So
right.
for most people, they're going to find that what they can do 10 reps with is, I mean, it stands to reason, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be a lighter bell than what you can do 5 reps with. It's half the reps. So your top set's only 5. So this is one of the virtues here.
Yeah, that's a good virtue. I think that's one of the better things about it that really resonated with me early on, for sure. Let's talk about some of the ugly, Roger, and the pitfalls and misuses. And you kind of alluded to this earlier, and I wanted to comment then, but I said I'll stay on plan here. And you said the ego climbing, like chasing bigger ladders and not focusing on the form. That can be sort of something you get caught up in, particularly if you're at the beginning thinking like, oh, I can get, I'm going to be better off if I do 6 ladders today instead of something else or whatever. Am I getting that right when you say that?
Partially, but I think what I have more in mind is actually going up to the next bell immediately.
Okay, tell me about that. So I finished 3 ladders. I'm ready for my next bell.
Well, if you can do 3 ladders with a bell, you're probably fine. The idea of a ladder, the way it works in your brain, if you let it, is it's a binary thing. It's a box you check. Did you do 1? Yes. Did you do 2? Yes. Did you 3? Whatever. This is important. However, when you get into more advanced lifting, more advanced strength training, when you really listen to serious strength athletes, almost all of them, if not all of them, are going to have some reflection on how hard that was, because they've learned a long time ago, if every workout is a hard workout, they stagnate. They start to lose ground, not gain ground. They realize that you can't grind hard every session. And I'm talking about the absolute best of the best of the best. I'm talking about the strongest people in the world who do world records. They will tell you this stuff. You cannot have every workout be a killer. So if all you're thinking when you're doing your ladders is, did I check this box? Did I do 5 reps? And you're not thinking about a rate of perceived exertion. If you're not thinking about what percent of my max was that, how hard was it? How did it take me 15 minutes in between rungs 4 and 5? If it took you that long between those rungs, you are not ready to go to the next bell. But sometimes people will just focus on the ladder. It's a binary thing. I did it or I didn't. Oh, I did the top set. Time to move on to the next bell. And that is not the case. You should, when you get to the top of the mountain, right, give yourself some time there and train, because it's still, you've only done it one time. Hang out there, let the stimulus train you. Don't just jump right to the next, I did my 28, it's time for the 32. No. It doesn't mean that once you get to the 28, you can't start working with the 32 for single reps. Cool. Try it out. See how it is. Is it your max? Cool. If it is, do it once and then leave it alone for a week or two, right? But the ego climbing tends to just look at the ladder as, I check these boxes, let me move on to the next one, rather than, hey, I've got a long time to stick in this area and still get lots of potential. Remember this idea of minimum effective dose. We want to get benefits with as little stimulus as possible because it gives us room to grow.
That
So
makes sense.
that's more what I have in terms of the ego climbing.
Yeah, so it's not the bro down where you're putting 2.5 plates on every time you do a rep. Um, what about you said here there's the frustration factor, and that's long ladders and just feeling like you're never going to finish them. This is something that I know some of my press workouts in the past have been this sort of way where it's like, oh my God, it's just, I have so many ladders. I'm not into it today. And that can be a bad thing for you. So I think it's one of those opportunities where you can circle back to something we discussed earlier, where maybe you stop your ladder a little shorter. Maybe instead of, oh, I got to do, whatever your ladders, maybe it's 3, maybe you're beat down and you adjust yourself to doing a 1, 2, 3 ladder, 1, 2, 3 ladder, 1, 2, 3 ladder, something that where you're able to tick that off a little bit sooner, get that, still get the volume in. Maybe you're doing an extra ladder because you've lowered it down. But that could be something that creeps up on beginners particularly. Would you agree with that, Roger?
I would, and I think that it's also important to realize this is goal dependent. So if your goal is hypertrophy and you're just like, I have to do how many ladders in order to hit this volume, it's probably better to do straight sets. And this does get a little tricky. We probably should have talked about this a little earlier. This isn't the ugly part of ladder training, but it can be the bad part about ladder training. Is it can be a little difficult to categorize. So the way I look at hypertrophy training with kettlebells, it's incidental. It just happens as you use them. I've never gone through a training program with any goal and not increase muscle mass. Personally, I've never seen a student do the same thing. They always get something. Am I claiming that kettlebells are the best way to grow muscle? Absolutely not. But it's not my goal. It's not what I'm trying to do. If that's what I were trying to do, I would go to bodybuilding because that's what they excel at. So the hypertrophy training is incidental. But sometimes I'm looking to create a certain stimulus. That's what I did in the beginning part of my press program, is I wanted to have a certain amount of sets per muscle per week. So let's say my goal is 15 sets, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking at literature that tells me an effective rep range for hypertrophy can be anywhere between 5 and 30 reps. Let's use that range. The range is variable. Let's say that's the one I'm working with. Well, I have a rung 1, rung 2, rung 3, rung 4. It would be illogical to say those reps aren't doing anything for me because they have to be. The 5 to 30, those are obviously just going to be averages, and 5 is probably going to do more than 1, but those other reps add up. But how do I account for that volume? Right? Do I say each rung is going to be a full set? Now, if I were doing traditional strength training, if I were doing a single, that would count as a set.
Mm-hmm.
But we start to get in this kind of weird territory where it's like, okay, how do I count this as far as stimulus goes? And this can also be kind of a weird thing when it comes to, the point you brought up about these really, really long workouts. How much volume do I need to do in order to get this? Let's say I want 15 working sets per muscle, and I'm looking on my presses and I'm only counting, right? I'm only counting the
5,
the top. Yeah. Or
Yeah.
maybe I count, reps, rungs 1 through 4 is one set and 5 is another, right?
Yeah.
Maybe I'm saying, well, total they're 15, so I'm going to count each ladder as 5 sets. Maybe, but there's a lot of time in between. So is there enough mechanical tension on those muscles for long enough. Time under tension is going to be an important factor with growing. So, maybe I'm going to count each ladder as 2 working sets, which means
Yeah.
that, I need 15 per week. How am I going to, it gets to be a little tricky.
It's a little bit
So
of a gray
this
area.
is, it is. And that's why I don't think ladder training is going to be great for this particular, this particular phase. So, for me, I'm going to do, in that case, if I'm looking to build, I'm going to do straight sets. And then for my technique work, I'm going to do some ladder training. So what I might do is, uh, uh, I will account for the overall volume. I might do some ladder work if I'm working, let's say, to press a 48. I might do some ladder work in the beginning of the program with the 32, which is not light for me, but it's not heavy either. And then I'll do some straight sets, and I'll decide what this is going to count as this many sets, and the rest I'm going to do straight sets with, maybe 6 to 10, 6 to 12, and I'll do
Yeah,
it
and
that way. But it can be a little tricky, and that's the point I'm trying to make.
you can even do the sort of like take the total instead of like thinking about, X amount of working sets. All right, well, if X amount of working sets equals 100 reps, let's just say, you can say, oh, well, I got 30 from my ladders and I'll get 20 more reps from my 2 sets of 10 with just a different weight maybe. And then that counts for 50. So when I come back to my second workout, I can replicate it and get my 100 in for the hypertrophy. But to your point, yeah, if you want that hypertrophy, it may be better to go with that longer set, the traditional 3x10 sort of thing.
Sure, but then again, not to be a pain, we have to go back to this original idea. Yes, I'm getting all those reps, but am I really focusing on my rung 1 and 2? Do those count as hypertrophy sets?
Yeah.
Because I'm not working with a really heavy bell, right? I'm not up at like a really heavy single that I might be with, like, let's say, a deadlift or something. And I'm not under tension long enough. So again, this gets to be really tricky. So you could do that, and what I would recommend is do that and then see what's happening, right? Are you getting the changes you want? And this is why it's important to measure your work. Have some, key performance indicators, something that says, hey, this is working or this is not. The unfortunate part is it can take a while to build muscle. So
Yes. So you got to
if
be in it for a minute before you got to pivot.
you do. So, I don't want to wait 3 weeks to realize that I've lost 3 weeks and I've made a mistake, right? Which is why I don't think ladder training is effective for that particular goal, or not as effective. You can do an experiment, and if it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. If hypertrophy becomes incidental, then cool, you're going to get some at some point, but how much, I don't know. So again, it always goes back to context. It always goes back to goal.
All right. Well, let's talk a little bit of practical applications and wrap this up for the people. So, we talked a lot about the press. Is there any other particular exercise or lifts that ladders are going to lend themselves to particularly well in your mind, Roger?
I'm a big fan of ladders for pull-ups, because pull-ups can be challenging for people. So it's a really great way to slowly build up those reps. Um, not necessarily, you're going to have to get your first pull up, and, you don't want to say, oh, I just got my first pull up and automatically I'm going to go up and get 2. You're going to have to take some time there, right, in order to build that up. But I do think that, you can work with some singles for a while and then start to build up, um, some general strength, some tissue tolerance, some know-how, and then you can get to a point where, you think maybe at a max you could do, let's say, 4 or 5 reps. You start with a 1 to 3 ladder, and you just start working those all the way through. That becomes, you do a couple of those, rather than challenging yourself to hit that 4 and that 5, right? Which you're going to fail at some point soon. You just stick with 1 to 3, 1 to 3, 1 to 3, and you get that volume in. And then when you're comfortable, you have it, you add that 4th rung, right? This is a way to do it. There are lots of ways to do it. You can do them for higher volume. Once you get up to the point where, maybe you can do 12 to 15 pull-ups, then maybe you want to do a 1 to 10 ladder.
Mm.
Right. And you can do them over days. There are a lot of things you can do, but I
Yeah.
think this is a good skill to do this for many people. Now, if you're one of these people who's doing, Sets of 30? Then no, probably
Yeah.
not. Not for
30,
you,
60,
unless you're
90
doing a
pull-ups.
weighted.
Yeah,
Yeah.
weighted, yeah, add some weight, add some more challenge to it. I agree with that, and what you kinda described right there, for the people, we've mentioned this in our programming episode, it's the 1-5-1. So the 1 is those singles, the 5 then subsequently is the ladders, and, that's just a good little framework to safely and smartly, is that a word? Smartly train.
Sure.
It is today. You know me. Yeah, we
Uh,
conversate, okay?
uh,
uh, um, so that'll get you there. The ladders, we've talked about mixing in different weights and stuff like that. You can do that. The ladder is going to differ from a pyramid, right, Roger? Or is it just simply one ladder up and then starting at 5 and working one ladder down? Are they similar in that regard, or is that even a factor? Or don't even worry about it?
we don't really, we don't, pyramiding weight. There are a few different ways to do it. You can do it with sets, or you can do it with weight. You can do it with reps. But yeah, I'm not really. It's just another way to play with weights. And honestly, I'm not even really interested in working with all these different modalities. They can be effective for barbell training quite a bit.
Mhm.
Um, I'm less interested in the modalities and the schemes, and really focusing on the stimulus, right? What are we getting? So if we're pyramiding, if we're playing with going up in weight or down in weight. I've seen different pyramids work different ways. I'm less interested in doing a pyramid and more interested in what are the volumes at each relative percentage that I'm going to accumulate, because I want to focus on the stimulus. What am I asking my body to do, right? Each stimulus is going to be good at asking your body to change in a particular way. If it's really heavy, okay, it's likely going to suggest to your body that it should get stronger. If it lasts for a long time, it's probably going to suggest to your body to grow muscle. Like these are the things that I want to focus on, rather than the individual um, you know, types of ways that you can do that. These are usually advanced methods that are designed to push you past a plateau, and really expose you to novel stimulus. So um, I'm more interested in what is the stimulus that my body needs right now, and do I need something novel? Do I need something different? Supersets, all of these different things can be effective ways to push you past that, but you have to keep in mind the original. What is the goal? How do I stimulate that to happen? Does my nutrition support it? And do I have enough recovery to actually get stronger?
Yeah, and that's one of the cool things with the ladders is one, it's got the built-in recovery, and you're not so taxed at the end of it that you can't come back and do it again. Like if I needed to do press ladders tomorrow, I could do press ladders. Maybe it's a different weight to adjust the intensity, but it's not left me sore, as you know, with most kettlebells. So let's
Well,
sum it up here. Go ahead.
hold on. Don't that's a
Oh,
really
okay.
solid point that people need to understand. So don't gloss over that one either. So let's say you're doing your 30 reps, right? And you're doing straight sets of 10. That might make you sore. That might create a metabolic response where your body feels soreness and you're creating more damage to the muscle. Okay. Now you're not going to create as much damage to the muscle if you're doing the latter, because there's some built-in rest and there's some lower rungs. You're never really going that high. So you very well may, in many cases, maybe you can do one pressing session a week. Well, when you do ladders, you can easily do three. I've done it lots of
Mhm.
times. You can do a little bit of pressing every day, because you never get that same fatigue. You never get that same beat up feeling. So now you can't do that a lot with heavy pressing, but in the beginning of a program, you can absolutely do that. So that's a really solid point for ladder training. Is you can do a lot of work, you can do more volume over the week, you can do more total reps, get more total touches without the same fatigue. The downside is you're also not going to get the same stimulus to the muscle, because if you were, then you would create more fatigue and you'd get more soreness. So sometimes it might work in your benefit, sometimes it might work against you.
And it might be somewhere you mix into two, like if you're a beginner, you're going to get some really good solid form development out of using your ladders. Be cautious about that ego chasing that we talked about, where you do a ladder, then you think, oh, I've got to jump the next bell. Let the time and the volume train you. Let those things happen, because it's going to get you to where you want to be in the long run and be better off for it. If you're more advanced, you can use these ladders for the strength density. And just like we've kind of peppered in throughout this whole conversation, that higher rep work is going to prove to be beneficial at times, especially if you need it. And it may be the answer if you're looking for hypertrophy. So think about that. Um, and I just think ladders are really solid to have in your back pocket. Once you understand them, once you start to use them, you can pull them out whenever you need to, and you're good to go with it. All right. So that was a case for ladders. Anything else?
No, I think we probably talked about them more than people really care to hear.
Oh, they're like, whoa, that was a lot of ladders. Speaking of ladders, did you know if you download the Bells app on the Apple App Store, we have a quick start function. You can just fire up the ladders right then and there. You know what I mean? You just say quick start, ladder, 5 rungs, let's go. It's that easy. All right. I think that's it. That's a lot of ladder talk, and we're not even firemen. Okay, one dad joke done. Perfect. All right. On behalf of us all, stay strong. Roger.
Bye, everybody. Was that us, all the voices in your head?
Yeah, I just narrated them all to everybody. I don't care. All right. Thanks for listening, y'all. Subscribe, like, all that crap. Bye.